because they ended up rebooting it into.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about this one.
They ended up rebooting it. So that movie did badly. I don't know what it was. Apparently, looking like the Christopher Reeve version wasn't enough. Also, Bryan Singer sucks. So he sucks. Made the worst X-Men movie.
That's fair.
So that all led to in between that movie and this next one, a big important series of movies came out. I bet you can't guess what they are, Jordan.
Sorry, I zoned out there. A series of movies about Superman, you say?
Well, Superman between 2006.
Well, there was Man of Steel. There was Batman versus.
You're answering the wrong. Sorry, let's try this again with you actually paying attention to me this time. So in between 2006 and when Man of Steel came out, a series of movies came out.
Oh, there was the Dark Knight.
There you go. And those.
Sorry. I was distracted.
Those impacted superhero movies negatively. Hey, I know Batman fans don't like to hear that.
Even though they were good movies.
They're good movies, but they so that eventually led to a movie called Man of Steel.
The world's too big, Mom.
Then make it small. Focus on my voice. Pretend it's an island out in the ocean. Can you see it?
I see it.
My son was in the bus. He saw what Clark did.
You have to keep this side of yourself a secret.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Which is the worst Superman movie. We're gonna say that up front. Yep. Superman is because Batman versus Superman. It's not really a Superman movie. I would say it's generously half of a Superman movie. It's 50% a Superman movie. It's not a full Superman movie.
Although I will say, because I'm gonna be devil's advocate here for just a quick second, I do think the Injustice one gives it a run for its money.
I mean, at least Superman's in that movie for most of it, for 90%. At least Superman's in that movie for 90% of it.
That's fair. I'm just saying, I arguably think it gives it a run for its money.
At least it doesn't begin with a 15-minute prologue with a completely irrelevant character.
I'm not disagreeing. Okay, I'm just saying
before we jump
it's
into Man of
also
Steel,
bad.
We'll do the background. We'll do the background. So yeah, this Man of Steel is obviously written. I don't know if it's written, but it's directed by Zack Snyder. It's produced by Christopher Nolan and his brother. I believe David Goyer wrote it. And so it has a lot of influence from The Dark Knight and Batman. It's very Batman coded. It's got a lot of Batman. Their cinematography. Their
Absolutely.
Stuff. That is, of course,
he wanted to take Superman and turn him into Batman.
So that, of course, is Man of Steel. Now, before I jump into my thoughts on Man of Steel, you all at home watching this on the YouTube video, are going to now watch Jordan talk about Man of Steel like well over a year ago when we did Say a Nice Thing About a Movie You Hate. You're gonna watch that now. With that, we're going to go to Jordan's book report, where I remind him that the assignment is you have to say something nice about what you're about to talk about.
Okay. So,
what did you pick?
Well, was picked for me, but I have 4 movies that I'm going to be talking about. 3.5, 4. One of them is technically the same movie, but slightly different. So
I would argue to skip to the end. It's completely different. Would be my argument.
So we begin with Man of Steel, and and I've been trying to think of the right way that I want to word this. How much you enjoy these movies will entirely depend on how much you approve or like or dislike the very notion, the comic book idea of superheroes are gods.
Hey,
I don't like that. I don't think it works. I don't enjoy it as a story beat or a story idea to begin with. So these movies, for me, were always destined to fail. And then when I first watched these when I was younger, I couldn't articulate that. They just didn't feel right. Didn't feel like Superman. The characters didn't seem right. The writing was atrocious. The pacing was terrible in most of these. So, with that all being said,
in most, wait, stop, time out. Most, sorry, hold on, flag on play. Which one of these doesn't have bad pacing?
I would say the first one.
Really?
Of them all, maybe
Fascinating.
Justice. Maybe no, Justice League's pacing is terrible, never mind. But yes and no. Superman's first Man of Steel story, it follows an arc. It has the beats that it hits, and it doesn't feel like you're rushing through any of it, really.
How can you say it has good
But
pacing?
I hate it.
When we sat
I
there
know.
and made
No,
fun
I
of the
didn't say
30-minute prologue.
I didn't say it had good pacing. I said of all of them, it has the best pacing.
Okay, no, fair. That's fair. Okay, totally fair. Sorry, continue. Sorry.
Those are very
Okay.
different and distinct points that we
Okay.
could make there.
We flagged on the play. We flagged on the play. Determined. No penalty. You may continue.
So, and it's funny that you bring up the first 30 minutes because that's about the only nice thing that I have to say about this movie. Those first 30 minutes where you're following Superman's dad and like you're seeing Krypton and all the alien stuff, and it feels like a very fun sci-fi movie that has nothing to do with Superman. And those are fun.
Yeah,
I
remember the first time
I
watching
enjoy
it being
those.
Am I not watching a Superman movie? Am I not watching a Superman movie?
It's very confusing when you remember that it's a Superman movie, but you got laser pistols, you got Avatar, animal that he's flying on.
I used to say I think he'd be good at science fiction, but we've seen his science fiction output, so maybe if we did a science fiction that wasn't Star Wars, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But for me, that's about the highlight of the movie is that beginning part, and then we get into the actual movie, which it just goes downhill from there.
Yeah.
So I am going to make the argument here, controversial opinion maybe, that he was told by the studios, Zack Snyder was told by the studios that he had to do a Superman movie. He didn't want to do a Superman movie. He wanted to do a Batman movie. But he was told by the studios that he had to do a Superman movie. Because everything to do with that character. Let me when I arrive at the Zack Snyder Justice League movie, I will explain what makes me think that. But everything about that character is not Superman.
Yeah,
it's Batman.
But that's
everything from how brutal he is to the fact that in Man of Steel, there's a point where he's fighting Zod. Zod kicks a bus at him, and does Superman try to stop the bus? No, he just jumps out of the way and lets it crash into the building. Everything about that character, even in Batman versus Superman, is not Superman.
Here's what I will say. I will say two things about that particular criticism. Number one, no, I do think that he wanted to make Superman. His idea for what he wanted to do for Superman is what he claims, what he says, and what Snyder Bros will say. That's the part I'm going to play today. Is they would say that his intention is for it to be deconstructionist. So you're right, it's not Superman, and that's the point. It's supposed to be deconstructing the very idea of Superman. Also, the notion of Superman being like Batman or being dark and trying to make him instead of because Superman typically is supposed to be, we want to rise to be Superman, and the Zack Snyder movies as a whole, I'm just going to say this preemptively before we get into the other ones, their desire and intention is to pull Superman down to our level. It's to be like, Superman is just like us, shitty. But the him being like Batman stuff, that has everything to do with the fact that Christopher Nolan and his brother produced this. A lot of that darkness and all that stuff that you're talking about, that was notes from them. A lot that came from them. So that's what I mean when I say
Yeah, so that kind of feeds into my point.
Christopher Nolan ruined Batman. So whenever I say Christopher Nolan ruined Batman and Superman, this is what I'm talking about. This is the
that kind of feeds into my point, though, is that he is Batman. The guy who made Batman came in and made him into Batman.
Pretty much, yeah.
They followed the formula of what made those movies successful and turned Superman into Batman.
Try to, yeah.
He's Batman.
Yeah, and before
he's about as bad. He's about as bad. To quote a Boy Meets World line, he's about as close to being Batman as you can get to being Batman without actually being Batman.
And I would say about in regards to Man of Steel specifically, and I've always maintained this: it's okay in isolation. It's fine if you want to look at it and you want to approach it as this is what. Hold on, let me finish. This is a Superman movie that is it's a shitty. This is the shitty art house like pretentious like version of Superman. And this is what like an auteur would think Superman would be, and then we don't do anything else with it, and then we come back 5 years later, we make a proper Superman with color and joy and optimism, and we're like, oh yeah, this is like, what if we did Superman as like an independent art house piece, like that with that approach to it? It's fine. It's what they do afterwards that I take issue with. Apart from the big thing you're going to talk about.
So okay, again. And this is where I wanna emphasize this. I understand the point. Like I understand the point of like the humanity sees him as a god and like he wants to be like more human, but because he has to be in the role of Superman is a god to these people. So that's why like he's less nice.
Yeah.
I guess is the way I would put it, is because he's trying to fit into this role of what everyone else wants him to be. I get that's the point. I don't like the point. I will never like the point.
Yeah, no,
I will never appreciate it for what he wants it to be because I don't want it to be that.
Yeah.
So like I understand the point of like, okay, Zod comes to the planet and Superman has to fight against him, and like the point I will say this time around, him breaking the neck bothers me less.
Interesting.
Because I get the I understand what he was going for. I understand this time around. First time I watched it, I was so viscerally upset that he wasn't Superman.
Yeah.
That I couldn't like see what Zack Snyder was going for.
To be fair,
but this time around, I understand. Let me finish my thought here. This time I understand the thought that it was essentially Zod had stated he was never going to stop, and Superman had no choice.
Yeah.
His hands were tired, and the only way that this version of him felt that he could stop him was by putting him down.
Yeah.
Now, I would make the argument that I would still make the argument that in that scene, that is not a Superman thing to do.
No.
The Superman thing to do would have been to lock him away in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
He would have put him back in the Phantom Zone and been like, all right, well, maybe I'll let you back out when you're really willing to see reason. Da, 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 da. And then he would have flown around. And then he would have flown around the world 3 times, made time go back in time, or made time go in reverse, so that all the damage, so that the damage would have been undone, and all the people would have not been killed.
Well, but the thing is, I don't have an inherent issue with the idea of following up on like what we're jumping ahead, but the idea of like holding a superhero or Superman accountable to the damage he causes, although most versions of Superman would have cleaned up the damage he caused.
I mean, exactly. That's the thing.
I do. My thing.
I understand what you're saying, and I don't disagree. I don't disagree like with having it be there a fallout or the consequences of an action or anything like that. But the character has to stay in character, and he's not Superman.
He has to accept the consequence, whereas in Batman vs Superman, he doesn't. He doesn't accept that. He just seems to be irritated that he's being put through the hassle. My thing with Man of Steel, and I've always said this, and I'll stand by this, and I've said this as a justification to you many times. I don't take issue with the neck snapping in and of itself. I don't I don't take issue with he's not Superman. because and him flying through buildings and like causing massive destruction. If the point is yes, he's not Superman, because technically he's not Superman yet, right? This is the first time he's put on the costume. He doesn't have a name. He doesn't have an identity as, and I talked about this in separate videos of the idea of the identity of the hero themselves being separate from the secret identity. So like Peter Parker and Spider-Man are two different guys, right? They share a body and and personality, like they share elements, but they're not the same characters. And it's the same thing with Superman and Clark Kent. They're two separate, especially with Superman and Clark Kent, they're two separate identities and two separate guys. And that's before he's discovered the identity as Superman. And so to be like, to come back and make a Man of Steel 2, where that's the point, where it's like, yeah, he wasn't Superman yet. And this is him. That was the guy's first day, and what a disastrous first day it was. And he has to come back from that, and he has to deal with having killed like the only other one of his kind, essentially, right? Like deal with that, the emotional fallout of that. If that's the point in that, if they had made it Man of Steel, but the question is, would Zack Snyder have been capable of doing that? Because there's a reason why the next one has Batman in it.
So here's what I'm going to say in response to that. That if that had been the point, and if that had been the direction they went with, yeah, maybe it would have been fine. But the issue that I have is that I don't think that was the point. I don't think that was ever the plan for what he wanted to do. I think Zack Snyder's point was that he was a remorseless alien that had no sympathy. And the next movie that he makes, which is where I'm leading into Batman versus Superman.
Sure. Wasn't that fun? Isn't it fun to go down memory lane? So that's what Jordan said. That's what we talked about back then. And it had been a while since I'd seen that movie when we did that. So now I've seen it, and yeah, this movie sucks. I think I sent Jordan several voice chats where I was like, "This movie sucks. It sucks. It's badly structured. It's badly written. The fact that the first." Okay, what did I tell you what time he eventually showed? The fact that Superman doesn't show up.
I think you said it was like 40 plus minutes.
47 minutes, I want to say, was the amount of time. 40 plus minutes of your 2.5 hour Superman movie is when Superman finally shows up. It opens with an agonizingly long 20-minute prologue about an irrelevant fucking character that you could completely cut out, because Jor-El just it's like Russell Crowe was like, okay, yeah, I'll be in this movie, but I want more screen time. Like, that's how it reads, because you could completely cut that scene out completely, because Jor-El shows up as a hologram later and literally says all the shit that happens in that previous scene. Literally, he spends 5 minutes telling Superman what we watched in the previous scene. And it's like, guys, you already showed this. Like, I don't need you. You could just do a cut and he said it. Like, you don't need to have him explain what I watched earlier. And he spends a great deal of time going into his backstory and saying all this really boring, needless shit. And it's slow, and it's dark, and it's dour, it's boring. That having been said, now I'm going to say nice things.
Someone has to.
Now having what honestly made me kind of change my tune about it a little bit is watching Superman 2, because like the big complaint about it is how Superman snaps Zod's neck. Spoiler alert: it ends with Superman snapping Zod's neck, and I've seen a bunch of bad takes of people trying to excuse it, and I've
definitely part of the issue. The other part of the issue for me is just his portrayal generally.
Honestly, go
on.
Honestly, in retrospect, the portrayal generally is honestly pretty close to Superman. Like, it's a different idea and conception of Superman. It's a different, because I think what tends to happen is you tend to bleed the Batman versus Superman of it with Man of Steel. In Man of Steel, to be fair, he's not quite Superman yet. He's still kind of discovering who Superman is.
Yeah.
When he first shows up in the hold on, let me finish. When he first shows up in the costume, he's not Superman, right? He doesn't really become Superman until about midway when they start calling him Superman. But the big thing is his interactions with Lois Lane and the generals and the army is Superman. That is how Superman interacts with people like that. Like, he is Superman, and he's doing a proximity of his version of Superman in this movie. Yes, you may go.
I don't remember. So, spoiler alert, it's been like a year, probably more than that, since the last time I talked about this and the last time I watched this movie. Take that with a grain of salt, or take what I say with a grain of salt. But my thing with this movie, and this is where how much you're going to like Henry Cavill as Superman in this movie ultimately depends on how much you like the new 52 version of Superman.
That's just it. He's not that much like the new 52.
Yes,
that's my thing.
He is.
But he's not.
Yes,
he is. But not when he's Superman. Like, that's my thing.
Yes.
Hold on. Let me finish. The Superman, again, a year. I just watched this yesterday, so we're gonna take my word over yours. But he understands Superman in that, like, he's got, like, the scene that made me go, okay, no, he gets Superman, he doesn't get Clark Kent, right? Like, his Clark Kent is too stoic. It's too. But his Superman, like, he has a fun back and forth between Lois. His back and forth with the General is super fun. Like, that is Superman. Like,
wouldn't be much of a surrender if I resisted. And if it makes him feel more secure, then all the better for it.
What's the S stand for?
It's not an S. On my world, it means hope.
I don't mind him.
Yeah.
He's not the problem.
I would say yes, to answer your question, yes.
I still don't think he does, but I don't blame him.
Everything wrong with him.
I don't think he portrays him as Superman in either of those movies. I don't think he does.
Well, again, having watched a wide array of Superman, so this Superman again is very similar. His Superman in Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, totally different.
I guess I should clarify. Sorry, real quick. I should clarify. When I say he's not Superman, he shouldn't be in that movie. He's a year one Superman. He's not Superman.
But his
right, like he's in that movie. He's displaying what would become Superman. But he's to me in the equivalent of, in that movie, he's the equivalent of, like, if you took the Smallville guy and put him in the suit. Yeah. Like in the middle of Smallville, he's not Superman, like, but he shouldn't.
But
be.
The scene, like they say, the scenes where
you always compare it to Amazing Spider-Man. How, like, when Andrew Garfield first puts on that mask, he's not Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's the idea.
When I say he's not Superman, that's what I mean in that movie. The problem with, he's not Superman, but he shouldn't be.
The problem with Henry Cavill is he goes on to be in Batman vs Superman. And that movie absolutely, utterly. So, sorry, to answer your question. That movie, he should be Superman, and he's not. To answer your question, this first one fully restrains Zack Snyder, and this version of Superman is a legitimate, believable. If Superman existed in the real world, I believe this is how the world would interact with this. And
you're either going to like that or you're going to hate it.
They let Zack Snyder have... This movie made a decent amount of money, and they let Zack Snyder do whatever he wants in the next one. And that's where it goes off the rails. Like, if you do... Because I don't think... Because, and again, a thing I discovered this week is Superman kills people when he's Superman. Sometimes he doesn't have a choice. Sometimes he doesn't get a choice, right? And I appreciate that in this, like, yes, it's all about how you follow it up. So if you do a narrative where he now is like, okay, I did it once, I'm never doing it again, then that works. Isolated,
and works. If I remember correctly, what I said in my original opinion.
I mean, the audience knows. They heard it earlier, so they
know. I mean, they are way ahead of the game. They know what I don't know.
They know what you don't know.
But I, if I remember correct, I believe that I said something to the effect of, it's not so much the fact that he does it, it's the lack of remorse over the fact that he does do it.
Right?
In Batman versus Superman, like, it That's the distinction. That's the distinction between a regular Superman, my hands were tied, I had no option, I had to do it moment, or an Injustice Superman who does it just because he thinks that villains should die. Like, that's the difference, is he has to have remorse over the fact that he does it. He doesn't.
So for reasons that you're not going to get until I explain later, ironically, this is all coming to this point, I used to feel that way until I watched Superman 2 with Christopher Reeves, where I went, Superman would never callously kill a guy. No, he absolutely does. To be fair, I completely disagree. He does show emotion. That's him going, "Ah!" at the yeah, that's him reconciling with the fact that he didn't want to do that. Within the scene itself, the context of the scene itself, like, look, is it amazing? Like, the intent is there that, like, he doesn't want. He's not doing it for. I joke that he's a psychopath, but he's a psychopath. Superman really doesn't come in till Batman versus Superman. In this one, he does in the moment legit feel bad. He's telling him, "Don't make me do this." Like, he's begging him, "Don't make me do this. I don't want to do this." And Zod is really giving him no choice. It's not the act itself. It's the following up of it. It's how they follow up with it. If they had done Man of Steel 2 and they did that however many minute montage defining Superman as a character and he felt remorseful in that, then the conversation would be different, right?
And I believe in my take, I essentially said the same thing.
But like, yeah, it's like Superman is weird and small.
I'm pretty sure.
And petty in this movie for some of it. And like initially, I was like, no, Superman's not like that. Put a pin in that.
He can. It depends on the interpretation. To be fair,
put a pin in that. But no, like I used to say no, he's not. Man of Steel is an interesting. The problem with it is it's not built to be built into anything. It's a great solo movie. It's a great reinterpretation. Like, it's a great like Elseworlds comic where it's like, what if they made it. They made it. It exists, but. What if Superman took place in 2013 and it was in the modern world? How would the army react to it? How would the government react to him? How would they do that? Like, where this universe fails is in the next attempt to, like, this needs to be a Batman movie and we need to build a universe on this. Well, no, if you had just stayed the course and made a Superman movie, yeah, this is an alright Superman movie. I will say, I hated it for most of it. Like, I was sending you messages hating it for, like, this first half of it. But, like, once it gets to the back half, it's kind of got memed to death. In that people have made fun of the back half of this, like, Superman doesn't care and Superman doesn't this. But it's like, yeah, it's still fun, well-shot action sequences where it's fun to watch them fight each other.
Part of the problem with that movie, with Man of Steel, is it has... and you touched on this, but it has the legacy of Batman versus Superman, and that taints it.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree.
It ruins anything that this first one sets up. Because for a long time, I think you and I both said the same thing, where this sets up a completely different sequel that never got made.
Never got made. I mean, I think I'm coming back around on it a little bit this time. Because of how much Superman shit I watched, I think I've come back around on it, but
I still think it's up there for one of the worst ones.
I was really kind to it the first time I watched it, but to be fair, I used to be overly mean to Superman Returns, so I was really like you were like, oh, this is post Superman, so you got to remember this is trying desperately not to be Superman Returns. That's the other thing you got to remember.
It's definitely not Superman. That's why it has the big punch at the end where they go through the city.
Because
Absolutely.
it needs to, right? Because the people accused the Superman Returns of being boring and being not having enough action. That was a big critical contention. So it needed to have more action, and so they hired an action guy. And I think Zack Snyder. This is where I'm going to end my re-trip down back to Zack Snyder. Oh, that's what I was going to say. The second time I watched it, I was off put by. I don't remember that opening sequence with Jor-El and Russell Crowe and it being a completely different movie. I don't remember it feeling that agonizingly long when we watched it in theaters. I don't remember coming out of that movie being like, this movie, right? Like, I don't remember coming out of that movie being like that bit with Russell Crowe was agonizing and terrible. I just remember being like the ending bit where they do a big punch was kind of fun. But like this time I'm like, and the last time the first time I watched it since I'd seen it in theaters, I remember being like, what the fuck is with this Russell Crowe bit? It's so long. It goes on forever.
You sure you didn't watch like a secret like extended version or something? Maybe the version
certainly
we saw.
Possible.
Maybe the version we saw didn't have all that, and it got added in later.
It's certainly possible that because I remember watching it on Crave, and I remember when it was on Crave because I remember watching the Batman vs Superman on Crave, and when you went to watch it, it was the director's cut cut, and it's 3 hours long, and being like, oh my god, this movie is even more agonizing than I remember it being.
So yeah, version you watched could have been a director's cut.
It could have been the director's cut I watched. Because I remember this time around it was only 20 minutes. I remember it being 30 minutes. I remember that section being 30 minutes long, and there being like an extended chase sequence with Russell Crowe, and it being agonizing. I mean, to be fair, to be clear, the 20 minutes was already agonizing. This movie could be 2 hours. It could be 2 hours to an hour 50, and it would be a much better movie. Like a much.
And that's one thing with this new one that I mean, I'm pretty sure we've already got an established Superman.
Yeah.
We don't need to see the Krypton and him being in the spaceship. That can be just a montage. I don't need 30 minutes of that.
Casting that Jor-El is in it, but I really would prefer him not be in it. I don't want anything involving Krypton. I mean, I know that it's a part of his character. Like they need to be there.
No. He can be there in the Fortress of Solitude as like
a hologram.
As like a hologram. That's the most that we need of Jor-El. That's it. That's fine. Anyways, that's next week.
But yeah, to wrap up Zack Snyder, and I want to tie Tim Burton back into this just for a moment to be like. If we let Tim Burton and Zack Snyder are just like the wrong guys for Superman. Like they're just the wrong, like I just more and more Zack Snyder was just the wrong guy. Zack Snyder, Christopher Nolan, those guys were wrong for Superman. They were so wrong for Superman, and that just becomes more and more clear as time passes from those movies. At least that's how I feel.
I agree.
Man of Steel. Hey there everybody, it's N-Card Justin. Let me know down in the comments why I'm wrong and why Superman 3 and 4 are obviously a way worse Superman movies, but I haven't actually seen Superman 3 and 4, so I don't know if they're way worse Superman movies, so until I do, this is the worst Superman movie. That went to theaters. Anyway, let me know your angry comments and thoughts down in the comments. But in the meantime, if you would like to see the full podcast, our Superman-sized Superman special, you click the box on the left. Or if you want to see a random video that YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy, click the box on the right. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. We put quality videos out 7 days a week, including a full, sometimes 5-hour podcast on Sundays. Or you can leave us a like as well. That helps us a ton. We'll see you all in the next video. I am a mess.